Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite weightlifting shoes. So I'm going to go through the pros, cons, and talk about sizing in all of these shoes, and everything is timestamped down below. So if you are interested in any one of these shoes, please jump around this video and get the info you need. I do not want you to spend all of your finite time watching this video when you're only interested in one or two of these shoes. Also, I do have a written roundup covering all of these shoes and putting them into different categories where I think they fit best. But that being said, let's dive into our first shoe. The first shoe that I'm going to cover is the TYR L-1 Lifter. So three pros that I have with this model is number one, it has a good amount of stability. So whether you are a weightlifting athlete or just a recreational lifter wanting a shoe for squats and some more static strength work, this model can be a really good bet. It has a nice thick rubber outsole and a TPU heel, so the stability you get in the shoe is really solid. The second reason why I like this model, and the second pro I have with this shoe, is the wider toe box. So the TYR L-1 Lifter is the widest weightlifting shoe on the market at the moment. So if you're constantly wearing weightlifting shoes and finding them to feel really limiting with the toe box, this could be a good option to explore because it is purposely built to have a slightly more anatomical toe box compared to other weightlifting shoes. The third pro that I have with this model is that it has a pretty good amount of midfoot security and the upper durability seems pretty solid as well. I have yet to have any issues with the shoe's durability, and I do like this dual strap system and the lacing system for providing you with a nice level of security. Now, two cons that I have with this shoe is number one, if you have a narrower foot and if you like a snugger fitting shoe, I actually don't think you're going to resonate with this model. It might feel a little bit wide for you, and if you do have to crank this lower strap really tight, it does get awfully close to the ground, similar to the Nike Romaleos 2 model when you pulled that lower strap super tight over time. So that could be an issue for narrow feet folks. The second con that I have with the shoe is that it's not going to be the most cost efficient for somebody who's on a budget. So this model does have a price point sitting around $200 USD. So if you're trying to save a little bit of money, this may not be the best shoe for you. When it comes to sizing in this shoe, if you have a narrow width foot, you should be safe going true to size. Now, if you have a neutral width foot or a wider foot, you're going to want to go up a half size in this model. That has been one of the main complaints with the shoe is that it can run a little short regarding length. So sizing up a half size, I think, is a safe call for most individuals. Overall, I have enjoyed the TYR L-1 Lifter. It's a good model, and I think it's a good first pass for TYR getting into weightlifting shoes. The second shoe that I'm going to cover is the Velaasa Strake. So three pros that I have with this model is number one, if you're on the market for a modern day weightlifting shoe that has a wooden heel, this is one of the few options that still offers this feature. So if you like wooden heels in your weightlifting shoes, this could definitely be a good option to explore. The heel provides you with a nice snappiness, and I just love the platform feedback that you get with wooden heels compared to like an EVA foam or a TPU. The second pro that I have with this shoe is when it comes to squats and heavier lifts, I really enjoy how this model helps you feel locked down. The heel feels nice and planted. The overall outsole up in the forefoot gives you a nice level of grip and traction. It really like plants the foot. So if you are worried about having a nice level of stability and nice security with your weightlifting shoes when squatting, weightlifting, whatever it might be, this shoe should do a pretty good job for your needs. The third pro that I have with this model is I like the midfoot construction. So I like the lacing system. On the medial side of the shoe, you do have these loops here, and I almost feel like that gives this model a little bit of like flexibility through the midfoot, but it doesn't take away from security. So it's an interesting feature, but I do like the overall lacing construction of the shoe and how that blends with the strap of this model. Now, three cons that I have with the shoe is number one, I do wish the strap Velcro over here on the lateral side was extended a little bit. I do think that would be a little bit better for folks with different anatomical needs, because if you do need to pull the shoe a little bit tight, you're gonna have a little bit of overhang. So I do think a little bit more Velcro would increase the strap security in this model. So while I like the midfoot security, it might not be the best fit for every single foot anatomy, especially folks who do need to really crank this strap really tight. The second con that I have with the shoe is it can run a little bit narrow through the forefoot. So we do have a slightly narrower toe box in the shoe. So if you have a wider foot or if you just want more width to really splay the toes, this will likely not be the best option for you. And then my third con with this model is its price point. So this shoe comes in at $250 USD. They're often marked down, but if you're paying full price for this model, $250 is a pretty big investment. So it's definitely not going to be a shoe for everybody, especially folks who do want to spend a little bit less. When it comes to sizing in this shoe, if you have a narrow width foot, go true to size. If you have a neutral width or wide foot, I would say go up a half size. Because this toe box does run a little bit more narrow, I think you'll be safer going up versus going true to size if you have a neutral width or wider width foot with the Velaasa Strake. The next shoe that I'm going to cover is the Inov Fastlift Power G380. Innovate, could you make that name any longer? I swear. three pros that I have with this shoe is number one, if you like a little bit more articulation in the forefoot of your weightlifting shoes, I think you'll enjoy this model. This model's forefoot breaks in easier than the other weightlifting shoes in this list, and it doesn't have the same like clunkier feel, so it does have a nice level of mobility to it. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that if you like lighter weightlifting shoes, I think you'll resonate with this model. So staying true to most of Innovate's shoes, this model does have a lighter weight overall. It has a nice lightweight upper construction that breathes pretty well, and the sole construction of the shoe also feeds into this model's overall weight, so it definitely runs a little bit lighter than some of the other shoes in this list. The third pro that I have with this model is that if you have a narrow or neutral width foot and you like shoes to fit a little bit more snugger and like more athletically, so a little bit more sock-like in nature, I think you'll resonate with this shoe. I really like the overall fit of this shoe. However, you don't get the most width in the toe box, which is something I do wish this model had, but I do like its like snug fit and how lightweight it is. It feels very athletic in nature. Now, two cons that I have with this shoe is, speaking of width, I don't think this is going to be the best weightlifting shoe for folks with wider feet. So despite Innovate saying that this model does run a little bit wider per the Innovate sizing scale, I don't think it's going to be the best pick for wide feet. And I would say if you have wide feet, you may want to pass on this model entirely or size up. And the second con that I have with the shoe is that it also has a higher price point. So this shoe comes in at $210 USD. If you are trying to save a little bit of money, you can find options that will perform just as well as this model and cost a little bit less. They might be a little bit heavier. So there are things about this shoe that do make it unique and maybe make the price a little bit more justifiable for some folks, but it's not going to be the most cost-efficient weightlifting shoe on the market. Regarding sizing with this shoe, if you have a narrow width foot, go true to size. If you have a neutral width foot, you could go true to size if you like a snugger fit, but I would suggest actually going up a half size. And then if you have a wider foot, you're also going to want to size up a half size or just skip on this model entirely, because I'm not convinced you'll get enough width through the toe box of this shoe. The next model that I'm going to cover is the Rogue Do-In weightlifting shoe. So three pros that I have with this model is number one, the price point. So this model has a price of $95 USD. For the construction and performance of the shoe, I feel like that price point is really fair, and honestly, it comes in at 50% of what most weightlifting shoes cost. So if you are trying to save a little bit of money and spend less than 100 USD, this can be a very viable option to look into. The second pro that I have with this shoe is, with its price point, I think of this model as being a really good like entry weightlifting shoe. So if you've never worn weightlifting shoes, and if you're just trying to figure out if you like them or when you're going to want to use them for your training, I do like the Rogue Do-In. I think it's a pretty consistent shoe, has a nice level of grip on the outsole, and its overall heel has a nice level of stability with this TPU construction. The third pro that I have with this shoe is the midfoot security that you get with this model. So this model has the dual strap system, provides a nice level of security. Now, I do wish the straps were a little bit more rigid, and I do wish that they would rework the lacing system, or at least just use different laces, because these laces can run a little bit long at times. But overall, I do think the midfoot security in the shoe will be enough for most lifters and athletes. So two cons that I have with this shoe is, number one, I feel like the last construction of this shoe is different than prior Do-In models. And what I mean by that is, I remember Do-Ins from like 5 years ago actually being a little bit wider and fitting a little bit more spacious in the toe box. This model does have a slightly narrower toe box from what I remember, and this model does run a little bit short. So I would suggest sizing up in this shoe, despite what Rogue's site says at the moment. I think going up a half size for most foot anatomies will be a safe call. I went true to size in this shoe, and I regret it because it runs wicked snug in the end of the toe box. So I do think a half size up would have been perfect for my neutral width foot. The second con that I have with this shoe is, with its leather upper construction, it can run pretty hot. So this is definitely going to be a model that you're going to want to wear thinner socks in, because it does run hot. And if you are doing a longer session that's in a hot gym, your feet can get pretty sweaty in these shoes. When it comes to sizing, I already touched on this a little bit, but I think most foot anatomies will want to size up a half size, at least in this shoe. If you have a narrow width foot, you can maybe get away going true to size, but I have a neutral width foot. I should have sized up at least a half size in this shoe. And if you have a wider foot, I would say go up a half size to a full size in the Rogue Do-In weightlifting shoes. The next shoe that I'm going to cover is the Reebok Legacy Lifter 2. So three pros that I have with this model is, number one, I really like the stability of this shoe. Compared to the other weightlifting shoes in this list, this model is a little bit heavier. So if you're using them primarily for squatting or even just for static strength work, so using them for things like hack squats and leg presses, I really like the locked down, anchored feel you get with the shoe. Now, the weight can be a turnoff for some contexts, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when it comes to being a nice, stable, anchored shoe, I really like like the fit and feel of the Legacy Lifter 2. The second pro that I have with this shoe is the overall upper construction. So the upper in this model, I think, does a good job of providing you with a nice level of security, and it hugs the foot pretty well. I also like that Reebok made the boot a little bit thicker and a little bit more padded because it does help provide a little bit more security in the heel, especially when doing cleans or other weightlifting movements. So I like the overall upper in this model. The third pro that I have with the shoe is the midfoot construction and the grip on the outsole. So with this shoe, you have a singular strap that goes across. It's a little bit wider, but I really like that Reebok brought the Velcro all the way down and that you can adjust this strap. So I do think it will work for most foot anatomies, and I like the midfoot construction, and I like the level of grip that you get with this outsole's tread patterning. Now, 3 cons that I have with the Legacy Lifter 2 is I touched on this earlier, but number 1, this model is going to be a little bit heavier. If you like lighter weight weightlifting shoes for creating faster foot turnover, or if that's just something you struggle with and you want a lighter shoe, this model may be a little bit heavy and clunky for your needs. The second con that I have with the shoe is that it does have a slightly higher price point. It comes in at $200 USD, so if you are trying to spend less, once again, this is likely not going to be the best budget-friendly weightlifting shoe for your needs. And then the third con that I have with the shoe is that if you have a wider foot, this model may not give you enough width. It is wider than other weightlifting shoes like the Innovate models and the Nike ROM 4, but it's not going to be the most wide weightlifting shoe on the market. Regarding sizing in the Reebok Legacy Lifter 2, I think if you have a narrow or neutral width foot, you should be safe going true to size, and if you have a wide foot, you're going to want to go up a half size in the Legacy Lifter 2. The next weightlifting shoe that I'm going to cover is the Nike Romaleos 4. So 3 pros that I have with this shoe is that number 1, if you have a narrower foot width, then I do think you'll enjoy the overall fit of this model. So if you typically vibe with Nike shoes and their overall last constructions that they use in their trainers, running shoes, weightlifting shoes, etc., I think you will enjoy the fit of the Romaleos 4. The second pro that I have with this shoe is that it does have a nice level of stability. You get this nice TPU heel, and the rubber outsole in this model are very dense. So if you like a firmer shoe with a little bit more stability, I do think you'll enjoy this model. And then the third pro that I have with this shoe is the overall midfoot construction and durability of the shoe. The upper in this model is pretty durable, and I do like the dual strap system. Now, I do wish Nike would update this lower strap for the next iteration because I'm actually not the biggest fan of it wrapping under the sole of the shoe, but I think for most lifters and athletes, they will get enough security with the midfoot construction in the Romaleos 4. Now, 2 cons that I have with this shoe is that if you have a wider foot width, or if you just want more toe box room, avoid this model. This model does run snug AF, so even if you have a neutral width foot, I'm not convinced you'll enjoy the fit of the shoe. I often find the toe box just way too snug, especially when it comes to the volume of the upper and how harsh it tapers. So if you have a wider foot, I would say steer clear of this model entirely. And the second con with this model is similar to most of the weightlifting shoes in this list. It does have a slightly higher price point at $200 USD. So if you are wanting a shoe for a little bit less, I would say shop around for more cost-efficient models or look for colorways on sale, because I believe more Romaleos are going on sale these days. So hopefully that means the 5 is coming out soon. We could keep our fingers crossed on that. I don't know anything about that yet. Now, regarding sizing with the Romaleos 4, if you have a narrow width foot, go true to size. If you have a neutral width foot, I would say go up a half size or go true to size if you like a snugger fit. And then if you have a wide foot, I would just say pass on this model entirely, because there are options that I think will fit your foot anatomy a little bit better. The next model that I'm going to cover is the Adidas Powerlift 5. So 3 pros that I have with the shoe is number 1, I think it could be a pretty good beginner-friendly weightlifting shoe. So this model has a lower price point. It has all the features that you want from a good weightlifting shoe, and it also has a slightly lower heel to toe drop, or a lower effective heel height. So if you've been training with flat shoes or just a lower drop in general, and you want to kind of ease yourself into what it's like to squat and train with an elevated heel, I do think the Powerlift 5 can be a viable option, especially for folks who have never used weightlifting shoes. The second pro that I have with this shoe is its price point. So this model has a price point of $110 USD. Now, that is up from prior Powerlift iterations, and if you are trying to save the most money possible, definitely look into the Powerlift 3 or Powerlift 4. I believe they're on Amazon. They're often marked down for less than 100 USD, and they're pretty strong performers as well. So definitely shop around at the other Powerlift models, but I do like the price point of this shoe because it does run a little bit more cost efficient than other weightlifting shoes in this list. The third pro that I have with this shoe is that it has a nice level of grip on the outsole, and the upper is pretty secure as well. So once again, I think if you're wanting a shoe that's pretty consistent for some general strength work, some weightlifting and squatting, this can be a pretty good shoe. It has all of the fixins without too much of the flair. flare and the higher price points. Now, two cons that I have with this shoe is number one, it does feel a little bit stiff and it takes time to break in. So unlike some of the other shoes in this list that have TPU heels or wooden heels, this model has a high density EVA. So it does have a slightly stiffer and clunkier feel, especially through the toe box. So if you do like a little bit more articulation and mobility in your shoes, this may be a model that you steer clear of. The second con that I have with this shoe is that it does feel a little bit more snug through the toe box compared to other Powerlift models. Now, the overall elastic construction feels very similar, but with the updated upper in the shoe, it is a little bit thicker. So I think it does create this like slightly snugger fit and feel. So if you do want a slightly more spacious upper volume with your toe box and your weightlifting shoes and you're looking into the Powerlift models, definitely consider the 3 or 4. They may be a little bit better for your context. Regarding sizing, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. If you have a neutral width foot or a wider width foot and you do want a little bit more room in the toe box, you may want to go up a half size, but I think true to size in this shoe should work for most lifters and athletes. For the final shoe, we are going back-to-back Adidas. So we have the Adipower 3 here. 3 pros that I have with this model is number one, it has a nice level of stability. We have a thinner sole up here in the forefoot, so you get a nice level of ground feedback. And then you have a TPU heel back here. So for most lifters and athletes, using these for squats and weightlifting, I think you'll enjoy the overall stability that you get with the Adipower 3. They do feel similar, I think, to the 1 over the 2, so I think that's a plus of this shoe as well. The second pro that I have with this model is that the canvas and ripstop upper in this shoe breathe pretty well, and I think they do give this model a nice aesthetic appearance. So if you are big on colorways, I do think this model can be a really good option to look into. I think it's a very clean looking weightlifting shoe, so that is something to consider with this model if you do like breathability and you are big on the colorways of your weightlifting shoes. The third pro that I have with this model is that it's a pretty consistent shoe. So you have a nice grippy outsole, good level of midfoot security with this strap, and the strap does come down a little bit further than other weightlifting shoes, and it does have a nice level of security, I think, for narrow and neutral width feet. So if you have worn the Adipower models in the past, so whether that be the first or second iteration, I think you'll enjoy the fit and feel of the Adipower 3. Now, two cons that I have with this shoe is number one, once again, for wide feet, I don't know if you're going to resonate with this shoe. It has a slightly more aggressive taper to its toe box, and with the lighter weight canvas and upper ripstop, you can get a little bit of foot overhang, I think, in the shoe, especially when you're catching cleans and you're pushing like the lateral side of this upper. So definitely something to consider for wider foot folks. This is definitely a more narrow or neutral width friendly weightlifting shoe. The second con that I have with this model is that Adidas upped the price of this shoe. So compared to the 200 USD, which has been pretty consistent for the Adipower 1 and 2, this model comes in at 220 USD, so it is definitely not going to be the most cost-efficient weightlifting shoe on the market. Regarding sizing in this shoe, I think if you have a narrow or neutral width foot, you should be safe going true to size. I actually found this model to run a little bit long, so maybe if you have narrow width feet and you often find that you have a ton of room at the end of your toe boxes, you might want to go down a half size, but I do think true to size should be a good call for narrow and neutral width feet for the most part. If you have a wide foot, you may want to go up a half size in this shoe, but again, the length does run a little bit long, so definitely consider that, or just skip on this shoe entirely if you are nervous about this toe box construction, which I do think could be a negative factor for this model for wide feet. All right, guys, that wraps up this video breaking down some of my favorite weightlifting shoes from this past year. Hopefully in 2023, we get to see some new iterations and models roll out. There are a couple on the way from what I understand. I just don't know specifics yet, but once I find out, I will be posting and sharing, so stay tuned for that. If you have additional questions on any of these shoes, drop a comment down below. I also have individual reviews on every single model to give you additional context. But as always, guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.